welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we talk about self-care that blends what we traditionally think of as self-care, like external practices where we're paying attention to our physical body and our health and well-being, and then also internal self-care, which we can think of as personal development, doing the stuff that really requires a lot of courage because there can be so much fear around it. And so when we find this harmony between some external self-care and some internal self-care, that's what I call courageous self-care, because that is giving us a whole life experience. And then we're filling up any emptiness that we have in ourselves instead of having to go out and fill it with other people and other things. So I think it's important to have a guide for this kind of thing because there's simply not a way to know all of it. You just don't know what you don't know. And so I love to be that guide for you. I'm glad that you have tuned in today. Thank you for being here. And I also love to invite guests onto the show to be guides as well, because I certainly don't know everything there is to know about self-care. It can happen in so many different ways. So today I'm glad to introduce to you Vikki MacKinnon. Vikki, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Christina. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. So Vikki, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you love to do.
Who I am and what I love to do. Well, I am a retired school teacher in my second career. I have a passion for numbers. I have a passion for helping people to understand who they are and how beautiful and magnificent they are and how they can move forward and share their magnificence with others. And many years ago, I was introduced to the ancient science of numerology, and it called to me in a most profound way that I like nothing I had ever encountered before. And I knew that it was something that I had to follow, and it was a hobby and a passion all through my teaching years. And when I retired from teaching, I took an early retirement. It just was just so obvious that was what I was meant to do, was to pursue the numbers.
I love that you match the idea of the ancient science of numbers with finding your most beautiful self and being able to share that with others, that amazing person, because that's what I feel like courageous self-care is all about, is this journey of self-discovery, finding out who you are underneath all the stuff that we get piled up on in life that may at this point still be unresolved. And from someone who didn't love math, I didn't know that numbers could be so amazing and fascinating and could help us with personal development until many years after I was finished school.
I didn't know that either, Christina. In fact, I absolutely hated math, and I struggled with it pretty much from grade 8. And I actually failed grade 12 math, had to repeat it. So if they had told me then that numbers are powerful centers of energy that can lead us to our highest level of integrity and fulfillment, you know, they can help us create the life that we want to create for ourselves and understand each other better, I would have completely been on board with math.
Right. There should be like two streams, those who want the mystical experience with numbers and those who want the concrete analytical experience.
I love it. Mystical math.
Yeah. I would have stuck around for that kind of math for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. So, Vikki, I love to get our guests on the show, my guests, just me, my guests on the show to share a current favorite self-care practice. And one of the reasons I love to do that is because I say current, because as we grow and evolve, it is important to flow with that. So I'm someone who can be really concrete and really think that I have to do things the same as I have always done. And then at a certain point I've noticed as I've been evolving, oh, that thing does not call to me anymore, or I just am not getting anything out of that self-care practice. And so I think it's important to know different ways and to know that it's okay to shift. And even if you heard from an expert that this is the way that you should do things, or if you have been doing something for years and years and all of a sudden it's not working anymore, that's okay. That's because you're evolving you get to find something new. So I love to hear different self-care practices. So what's something that you love to do?
What's something I love to do? My husband and I love to go to the Philharmonic concerts, the CPO, and I believe in the healing power of music, and I believe in the amazing lift that you get from being in a huge room, beautiful room, beautiful facility with people that are just so happy to be there and listening to the lovely music, and the energy there is just absolutely fantastic even before the orchestra starts. And so that's a favorite thing that both my husband and I share. And we love to go on road trips and on trips like, get on the plane and fly across the pond, that kind of thing as well. So we love to travel together. Those are very favorite things for me for us now that we have the time and our family has grown and we have the energy to do it still. We feel very blessed to be able to travel. Another self-care practice that I have enjoyed for a few years now is connecting with tarot readers or people who can help me understand and gain spiritual perspective. So the numbers tell a lot, but even those of us who are in the business and work with numbers or work with tarot, it means a lot to be able to connect with other people and get fresh perspective that they offer. So, yeah.
I love that. I love everything that you said. I can identify with all of it. I want to jump back to the live music, and it's probably no coincidence that music is very mathematical and numbers based, right?
Absolutely. So it is. Yes.
Yeah. So another way to enjoy that passion of yours in a totally different sense.
Oh, yes.
But I've noticed when I go to hear live music, especially classical music, my brain just lights up and I get all sorts of ideas. And you're right. It's so different to listen to it live in person with the excitement and energy. And I've heard the reason why it feels so good is that because when we're in the vibration, when the vibration of the live music is actually connecting with our vibration, it heightens everything. It's so different from listening to it on through speakers and headphones and that kind of thing. Plus, support musicians.
Yeah, that's great. We have that in common, I guess.
Yes. And then I love that you talked about seeking out other people to experience spiritual growth. And that perfectly aligns with one of the foundational skill sets of courageous self-care, which is getting connected. And there are so many different ways that we can get connected. I think it's a solution to the pervasive loneliness that a lot of people feel. We can connect to things that we love. We can connect to spirit. We connect to other people. And it, like I was talking about at the beginning, it's a way that we fill up those holes and don't have to go out and find it in problematic relationships. When we're seeking to understand ourselves, we're coming at it from the perspective of wholeness. And it's not that anything's wrong or missing, but more insight. It's such a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. So what is the most memorable thing you've ever learned from tarot cards?
Oh, from tarot cards. Oh, my goodness. The most memorable thing from tarot cards. Well, you've got me stumped there. Just that this too shall pass, that whatever it is that we're experiencing now will pass, and that we create our future. Tarot cards, numerology, astrology, this is not about fortune telling. This is not about what will happen to us. Heaven forbid that in this day and age we think that something will, happen to us.
Yes.
It is about understanding the prevailing energy and the potential in it, and seizing those opportunities to create something of lasting value, not just for ourselves, but for others as well.
Yeah, because we all have this, we all have skill sets and gifts and innate talents that are meant to be shared with others when we learn to cultivate them. And sometimes it takes another person to even tell us that that's what we have. We can have it so buried, or we've just never explored it. It's so helpful to have someone else say, hey, did you know that you're good at this, or that this is wanting to come through you? And I've had those moments from astrologers and energy healers where I've been like, what? No. And then as I go on and uncover it, oh yeah, that is exactly what I want to be doing. It's just so helpful.
It's validating and encouraging, I find. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's also nice to know that you're on the right track too.
Absolutely, yes. And I see that so often when I have clients come to see me for their numerology profiles as well. Very often they're doing exactly what the numbers indicate they can do anyways, and you know, at the right time. So it's good, it's validating, and yet it gives them clarity and helps them to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember once my husband said, when I was planning to go to see an intuitive, and he said, why do you do that? Like, you're just finding out what you already know. And I said, no, it's just that it feels so good to know that I'm doing what I'm designed to do, and to get little tweaks and insights on if there's anything that needs to be changed. But it does feel good to get that validation.
That's yeah. And what you said there about the tweaks and the insights, that's really important, you know. And sometimes we feel isolated as we're trying to work things out or plan our next best step. And it's just so helpful to break that isolation and go and talk to someone.
Exactly.
About it. You know, when you think about it, when you're dealing with someone who does that type of work, it's socially acceptable to sit there for an hour and talk about yourself.
Yeah, right. That feels good too.
And sometimes we need that, you know. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. This is the way I'm seeing this, you know, and I'm open to, you know, greater perspective here.
That is a great point. I've never thought of it that way, but that's probably why I feel so good after going to a session like that. I got to talk about myself for an hour. I love it. So thank you for sharing those self-care practices. Those are some great ideas. And the travel, of course, that is, it's a way of feeling adventurous and a way of definitely going outside of your comfort zone. I've been on so many trips where it's been really uncomfortable and kind of hard work. And then when I come back or reflect on it, I see how much I've grown.
Oh, absolutely. I remember the first huge trip that I took. To me, it was huge anyway. I was just recently divorced from my first marriage, and I was a single mom with 3 kids. They were quite young. Well, the youngest was a baby when it happened, and a year and a half old, and then a 6-year-old and a 13-year-old when I first became single again. And it was about 8 months later that I was able to take myself on a long-awaited trip to England. I had so wanted to go to England. I was a teenager when the Beatles became popular.
Yeah.
And I studied English lit and history and that kind of thing in high school and university. So I really, really wanted to go. And yet at the same time, it took all the courage that I had to strike off on my own. And then I remember coming back, and I did such wonderful things there by myself, and coming back and feeling like this made me more of who I am. It made me more. And that's how I feel about every trip that we take, you know, is it makes me more. We have the potential to become more of who we are when we travel. And if we're not in a position to travel financially or because of, you know, family commitments and that kind of thing, just using videos, watching travel shows and reading and trying to understand a different culture and get a sense of it, you know.
Absolutely. And if you live in a city where there are festivals that highlight different cultures, that's a great way to take a little mini trip.
Oh, for sure. Like a trip does not have to be 3 weeks, you know, or on the other side of the world. It can be 3 hours downtown into Chinatown or.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Great point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to pause here and have a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask you to share your story of courage. Welcome back. Thank you for staying. I think the story of courage that comes in the second part of the interview is definitely worth sticking around for. And the reason I love to get guests to share a story of courage is Vikki and I were chatting before the interview. It doesn't have to be this monumental thing where you had this giant experience and surpassed it and everything in your life got better. No, it's I love stories of everyday courage too, or stories that we don't necessarily think are all that courageous, but other people will say, oh, I think that's courageous. And that's because courage is really at the root of personal growth. If you want to go on this journey and discover who you truly are and become more of yourself, you're going to need to move through fear. And courage comes from the heart. And it also comes from the mind. So it's making conscious choices with your mind to move through that fear towards something that you value. And so, Vikki, I would love to hear your story of courage today.
Oh, golly. Okay. I thought of a few scenarios. I was thinking about, well, it took me a lot of courage to get married a second time, and I'm very glad I did. I've been very, very happy in my marriage, and we've both been happy. Yeah, that took a lot of courage.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it took me a lot of courage to go to Japan the first time, because I opened my email one day and I'd always said I wished I could travel with my work. I was a school teacher and going to the same classroom every day, and I enjoyed it because there was always something different going on in the school and that kind of thing, But when I left teaching, I thought, I'd like to travel with my work. It just sounds fun and interesting and that kind of thing, And I used to think, well, maybe I could give a workshop in Vancouver or Toronto, or hey, even Red Deer would be traveling out of town.
Yeah.
And one day I got an email said the workshop in Japan, and I thought, I can't even afford to go to a workshop in Toronto. I'm sure not going to one in Japan. But for some reason I read it instead of just immediately deleting it. And it was from a company in Japan that brings in North American speakers and healers and people in the whole area of holistic health and spirituality. And they were inviting me to go to Japan and teach numerology, and they would pay my way and put me up in their company condo, and would I come? So I had, just like, it was a split second of thinking about it. And obviously, I was going to say yes to this opportunity. But at the same time, I was going off completely on my own. I was going to a city on the other side of the world where people didn't speak my language and the culture was so very different. And numerous Skype calls with them and discussions and about everything from, what we'd need for the workshop to where I was going to be staying to, all these different arrangements kind of thing. And it was pretty, it was kind of intense and mind-boggling. And the day finally came for me to leave. And there I was leaving home and my husband, and I had a 2-week-old granddaughter at the time, and heading off to this country. I didn't know what it was going to be like, and I knew that I was going to have to get myself from Narita Airport, which is way out of Tokyo, right into downtown Tokyo, and nobody was going to be there to meet me, and it was, it was pretty daunting kind of thing, but it was, in the end I had such wonderful experience, and I went there 4 times to teach numerology. So yeah, stayed about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks each time. So, it was definitely worth it to overcome that fear. But yeah, traveling alone, particularly to a different country like that, had been kind of daunting, and I overcame the fear there.
That is such a fantastic story, and it's good on so many levels. The first thing that came to mind is that you got an intuitive hit that you would love to travel with work. And we don't really get intuitive hits that aren't meant for us. We get them because they are for us, and it's a heads up to be aware that something is going to come your
Yeah.
way. There's going to be opportunity. And then it came. And you checked out the email, you didn't delete it right away, and it was exactly what you had been hoping for. And then there was fear around it. And that's what we're going to get. We're going to get experiences that stretch and grow us. And you thought about it, you decided to go, you were outside of your comfort zone, you didn't know how you're going to go from one place to the next. I can totally identify with that, traveling as a woman on my own. And then it was so worthwhile. And that's exactly the journey of courage. So it's so important to know that it comes in that order. Like, it's pretty predictable. You're going to have intuitive hits. You're going to think, wow, that doesn't make any sense, or why is that coming, or that's never something I thought of before. And then there'll be this journey to get to the other side, whether it's a traveling journey or an inner journey, when your travel is kind of both. And then so worthwhile, and you got to experience exactly what you were longing for.
Exactly, although Japan had never been on the radar screen,
Right.
but yeah, everything that I'd been hoping for and more, really.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point too. Often it won't look like what we imagined. And so sometimes
exactly.
we dismiss those opportunities because it didn't match what we thought we were going to get. But really it's the universe or spirit or creator knows even better than we do. We can't know everything as the little human beings that we are, with our brains that can get laser focused on things being one way. And so I love that you were open to the experience.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I hopped on a plane by myself. Well, I make it sound so nonchalant. I was terrified.
Hopped on the plane,
And the whole ride, I was thinking, this is not something I do. Who does this? I am a woman traveling alone on a plane to a different country. And I was doing it for a business that I was running at the time. And I just was so mystified at who this person was, who was still in my body, but was being so adventurous.
Right.
And it set me up for even greater adventures that were to come. But I needed to take that initial step to be different from how I'd been before.
Well, exactly. And that's what I always say. Once you stretch that comfort zone, it's like the first time you put air into a new balloon. It enlarges and it'll never go back to the same size that it was.
That's a great analogy. I like that a lot. Well, thank you for sharing that story, Vikki. That was absolutely fascinating. So I have one other question for you. I'm curious to know, based on your work with numerology, do you have like a client story that really stands out for you on someone who came to see you and had a great experience?
Well, I think one of my favorite client stories, and I'm going to go back to Japan, because while I was there, I was teaching on weekends and doing sessions doing private sessions during the week. I had a beautiful lady that came to see me that had been in the earthquake. I don't know if you might remember, in 1998, there was a devastating earthquake in Kobe. Mm-hmm. And the people there had been left for, I think it was 8 hours before emergency services got to them. It was devastating. She'd lost her home, she'd lost her parents and her siblings and her business. And then within about 3 months, her marriage split up, and she still had a 3-year-old son. And so when I met her, it had been 17 years or something like that. I don't know, 12 years maybe. And she at that point in time had rebuilt her life to the point where she was she was president of a company that produced natural remedies, like health food company, I guess we'd call it here, and multiple branches around Japan and that kind of thing. And she was just so inspiring the way she had rebuilt her life. But she said to me that she greatly admired Audrey Hepburn, and she wanted to go to Africa like Audrey Hepburn had done and work with the children. Wow. And we looked at, and she was not sure about, the timing for dissolving her business and for making her geographic move and the way this would take shape and that kind of thing. So we looked at her numbers, her date numbers, her soul urge numbers from her vowels and that kind of thing. And we looked at those to see how, how she could best go about actually getting there, turning this dream into reality for herself. So just looking at her final major cycle, looking at her pinnacles, looking at her ultimate goal, which are all related to your birth date, looking at her soul urge, which comes from the vowels in your full name, the inner you, the driving force, your heart's desire, and that kind of thing. And we were able to see how this could take shape, and that I could see that the picture that I got was that she was working with a children's choir. She had a lot of three energy, and she loved to sing, and she loved music and children and that kind of thing. And that was a picture that I could see for her. And we worked it out. We worked out the timing together for that. So that was very rewarding.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I just felt like that question needed to be asked, and that gives us a good idea of what numerology can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if people want to connect with you and learn more, and do you do sessions online as well as in person?
I do. I have Skype sessions. I do Skype sessions all over. I've got clients in the UK, and I said I've been to Japan. I've got clients in the States and different parts of Canada as well.
So if people want to find out more, Vikki, where can they get a hold of you online?
My website is called Got Your Number. GOTYOURNUMBER, just simple gotyournumber.ca. And I do a monthly newsletter. In fact, it'll be going out today. And there is a button to subscribe to that newsletter. I have a book called Make Today Count. And there is an opportunity on the website to purchase the book, or they could call me. In fact, if they're right here in Calgary, call or email info@gotyournumber. My phone number is on the website as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, you're a fantastic resource. I love that this is a way that people can care for themselves by tuning into mystical, magical numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
And thank you so much for being here today, Vikki. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Christina.
My pleasure. And listeners, thank you from wherever you're listening all over the world. I am so glad that you have taken time to tune in because, as I often say, listening to this podcast is a form of self-care. It is taking time for yourself. It's learning new ways of seeing the world and interacting with yourself, going on that journey of personal discovery. I encourage you to reach out and contact Vikki and learn more about yourself through numbers. So thank you for listening. I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.